Okay, my name is Alejandro Lopez Melchor. That's my Mexican name. My name in the United States is actually Alejandro Gómez Cortez. I was born in La Piedad, Michoacán, but at the age of 6 months old, I was adopted and brought to the United States, and I was raised in East Oakland from 6 months all the way through till I was 43. I lived in the United States. I remember growing up in East Oakland. I remember the Black Panthers marching. I remember the Brown Berets marching through town. I remember the Vietnam veterans coming back home and not getting a welcome. It was real turbulent times. And I remember hearing Bobby Seale and Huey Newton talking to us on a street corner. And I remember Huey Newton telling us concentration camps existed long before Hitler even came up with the idea that they existed in America. But back then they were called plantations. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. At the age of 6 years old, I was sexually abused by an older cousin. He was 22. I was only 6. That whole thing was traumatic enough. But then at the age of 7, I finally get the courage to tell my parents, and they just beat the crud out of me. So I grew up with a bunch of physical abuse as well in my home. My parents were like two pit bulls at each other's throats day and night. What I remember most that they argued about was money. And I remember growing up and just thinking, God, when I have my family, I'm never going to be like that. And I will never argue about money. And I guess that's why I've been so irresponsible with money. So I'm growing up. My dad always kowtows down to my mom. My mom was the one that wore the pants in the family, and I didn't like that. She was real harsh, real abusive. And so at a young age, I start forming some ideas about what a man should be. And I looked to two uncles who were ex-Marines and that nobody in the family messed with. I once saw him at a wedding take down 8 cops. And I remember thinking, when I grew up, I'm going to be a Marine so I could be like my Uncle Johnny and my Uncle Sonny. And these guys were Vietnam vets. And that's consequently what I did. I started doing good in school. I started priming myself. I went out for track. But my home life was just a mess. At the age of 17, I did so well in school that I graduated early. And I joined the Marines. Well, my parents had to sign. And so they did. And one of the things that I have to mention at this point was that my recruiter told me that when I went to the induction center, that when I took my oath to swear in that I would become a U.S. citizen. And that was not true. Just coincidentally, it's the same oath verbatim between your induction oath and the U.S. citizen oath. I joined the Marines and actually do well in there for a minute. And then I had a girl back home, and well, she got killed in a drive-by. She caught 2 stray bullets that hit her neck, and she dies. So I started abusing alcohol, and consequently, I was all hungover, and so I was late 3 times to formation. I got 3 Article 15s in 1 year, and that got me kicked out of the Corps with a general and other honorable conditions discharge. Not a bad conduct, not a dishonorable. Anyways, I was just young, dumb, and couldn't manage my responsibilities. So I get out. And it shouldn't be any surprise why I gravitated to a gang at that point. I figured, well, I got to belong to something, and so I gravitated to a street gang. And then that just led to a life of not crime, but just abusing drugs. I started a pattern of recidivism, going in and out of jails, which then led to prisons. None of my felonies are violent. The worst one I got was the one that got me deported back in '96. I had 2 bullets in my bag. I was collecting disability because I actually did work. But it wasn't enough. I had 2 stepdaughters I was raising, a girlfriend who only worked part-time as a caregiver, and she was pregnant with my first child, which is Melissa. And so I got desperate. So I started selling cocaine. In my neighborhood, that's what sold a lot, was crack. So I get this bright idea, and I started doing it, and I actually become successful at it. I was maintaining a heroin addiction at the time. Lo and behold, I get busted in 1996 on April 1st. The judge had mercy on me, and he gave me drug diversion. And while I was doing time, some turn of events really impacted me and marked my life. Like I mentioned, I have 2 stepdaughters. One of them got molested while I was in there, and that really impacted me and really made me take a good hard look at my life. Another one was that my dad got diagnosed with terminal colon cancer. And so I had to get out in time to bury my dad. So I just really made a decision, all right, that's it. I'm not going to be from a gang anymore. I'm not going to do anything that's going to land me in here. When I get out, I really focus. I had to do 6 months residential treatment. I did it, got my head on straight, and I was a complete success from that point on. I have no new felonies after that. My first job was as a intake counselor at Volunteers of America, and my second job was as a bus driver for San Diego Transit. After that, I became a Greyhound bus driver. until I didn't want to take these long trips away from the home. My wife had got pregnant again with Junior, and he's the baby in the family. And so I get a job driving a truck for a nursery from 2001 till 2004. And then one day when I pulled into the yard, ICE is there. And I thought they were coming for the other workers of the nursery. And I went, oh, man, por paisitas. And no, they were there to pick me up. And it turned out that when I pled guilty to the sales, conspiracy for sales, and possession for sales back in 96, well, I was supposed to go in front of an immigration judge. And back then, it wasn't that bad. The towers hadn't fallen. There was no Homeland Security. INS was still INS. It was not ICE. When it became ICE, they had unlimited funds at their disposal. And so they came after me, and they deported me, and I fought the case. I lost. I got shot over there in 2006. I came back one day later. And I lasted 4.5 years in the United States until I had some beef with a neighbor, and he called the cops on me. And they came for me, and I was making breakfast for my kids. It was May 15, 2010. It was a Saturday, I remember it. And they did it in front of my kids. They slam you down on the ground, and they start treating you like you're this hardened criminal. And I was just illegal reentry. And I'm getting slammed down, face in the concrete, a foot on my neck. And it's just a god-awful, degrading scenario. And that your kids have to watch you get hauled off like you're some criminal, and you're not. The degradation, the humiliation, and the fear that they implant. The fear that they implant. And that's what I'll never forgive them for.